Welcome back to Road of Gojira, the series where we take a comprehensive look through the entire Godzilla franchise. Last time we went over Toho's modest beginnings, some of the key players who would work on the first movie, the design process behind the creature, and now we're going to look at the name, Gojira. But what even does that name mean and where did it come from? There's a lot to go over on just that alone, so let's get the basic facts out of the way first. The name Gojira is a combination of the words Gorira and Kujira, the Japanese name for whale. And obviously the creature resembles neither of these animals. However, it is possible that Kong served as the inspiration for the gorilla portion of the name. The film King Kong was a huge influence on this movie, so it's not completely out of the question. As for the whale portion of the name, it could simply have been chosen because the creature is a giant marine animal, and whales are currently the largest aquatic creatures on the planet, so perhaps that's how the name Gojira was chosen? But all that's just speculation on my part, as there are conflicting reports on the precise origin of the name and who came up with it. The most popular rumor that everyone knows about was that there was once a muscular man at Toho nicknamed Gojira. I first heard about this on Cinemasker's Monster Madness Godzilla-thon oh so long ago, and I did not buy into it. Why didn't I believe it? Well, because the man in question to this day has still never been identified. Sort of. Actors Takeshi Seki and Shiro Amikura have been speculated to be the mystery person with the Gojira nickname. But the film's director Ishiro Honda reports in an interview that the mystery person was indeed someone who worked in the publicity department. Eiji Tsuburaya even recalls in an interview for Famous Monsters of Filmland that there was a tough-looking man nicknamed Gojira who worked at Toho. Now, even though all this is coming from two of the most important people who helped create the movie, we're still just getting the vague answer that it was a Toho employee whose nickname was used to name the monster. Over the years, fans have frequently questioned this myth because the man in question has never come forward to confirm it or even been identified. Honda's wife, Kimi, would often remember that the stagehands at Toho would frequently tell each other absurd stories, and she thinks that the employee called Gojira is one of those ludicrous tales. Another rumor is that Tomoyuki Tanaka was informed by producer Ichiro Sato about the stagehand with the Gojira moniker. However, some sources also assert that Toho sponsored a competition to come up with a name for the beast. Now, you would think something as simple as where the monster got its name from would be easily documented, but as you can tell, we just get a bunch of different answers that just crisscross each other in every direction. In other words, we just don't have a definitive answer. Regardless of the whole thing, the monster now has its title, and Project G was now one step closer to completion. But now it needs a story. Shigeru Kayama had swiftly finished the story treatment and submitted his nearly 50-page narrative before the end of May, with input from Tanaka and numerous Toho literary department personnel. The primary characters who would face the beast were also created by Kayama. Our main leads are a salvage diver named Ogata, his fiancée Emiko, her father/paleontologist Dr. Yamane, and the mysterious scientist Dr. Serizawa. The story begins with a string of occurrences, with ships mysteriously being destroyed out at sea. A survivor of one of the attacks, named Masaji, makes it back to his home on Odo Island, but he soon meets an awful fate when a huge beast known to the islanders as Gojira shows up and begins consuming the livestock, killing people in the process. Emiko goes with Ogata and a crew from one of the ship businesses to assist in recovering the wreckage of one of the vessels that washed up on Odo Island. Gojira is spotted on the island by Ogata and Emiko, who are tagged along with Shinkichi, a resident of the island. After their encounter on the island, the characters return to Dr. Yamane, who makes the assumption that the creature is a prehistoric beast that was awakened by the hydrogen bomb. He soon becomes completely enthralled in it, and questions how the animal had survived for so long. Now, because he is so fascinated with the creature, he at one point considers keeping the information a secret, and even tries to sabotage a plan to electrocute the beast, whom has now reached Tokyo Bay, where it destroys a lighthouse, consumes a bunch of African animals on a ship, and destroys an electrical blockade too while he's at it. In order to destroy the monster, a scientist named Dr. Serizawa has invented the Oxygen Destroyer, a secret weapon that may have the capability to eliminate Gojira. Now, in the story, Gojira is a floppy-eared monstrosity that roams around killing people and destroying things just to get nourishment. Yes, the beast is simply motivated by hunger, which is not the most original thing that could have been written, and just makes Gojira come across as a wild animal on the loose, rather than being a metaphor for nuclear annihilation. To add even more amazing elements, Kayama bestowed the creature with a unique power, a fiery breath that bursts from its mouth, similar to that of a fire-breathing dragon. Kayama's story was good, but it needed a lot of adjusting. This is where screenwriter Takeo Murata would step in to turn the story into a full screenplay for film. Honda would eventually join him to help co-write the narrative. Tanaka, Tsuburaya, and Kayama contributed more ideas to the story as well. And often Tsuburaya encouraged Honda and Murata to come to him with whatever creative ideas they had involving the monster, and explaining how he could make the scenario work. Both Honda and Murata decided that the movie should not be viewed as a straightforward monster picture, and instead be treated as a serious real-life subject matter, with the creature representing the bombs that were dropped on Japan and the fire raids in Tokyo. Honda even replaced Gojira's fiery breath with an atomic heat ray. This alteration stemmed from Honda's desire to make radiation visible. Gojira's eating habits were largely removed, the characters were slightly altered, and the city of Tokyo played a much larger role in the narrative. And by that I mean it gets completely demolished by the creature, which was a notion that was not in Kayama's original draft. Gojira's height was set to be about 50 meters high, which was just tall enough to peer over Tokyo's biggest buildings at the time. The crew knew this was not going to be an easy task to visualize, so to help gain a sense on what this madness would look like, over 200 to 300 storyboards were created in order to gain an understanding on how to design these effects-heavy portions for filming. In fact, did you know that Gojira was one of the first Japanese films to use this method? This was all thanks in part to Iwao Mori, who learned about this approach on one of his visits to Hollywood, and it really helped out big for this movie. On the effects side of things, Tsuburaya had initially intended to use stop-motion animation to bring Gojira to life, similar to how King Kong was created. However, Tsuburaya anticipated that, given the personnel and facilities at Toho, it would take roughly 7 years to finish all of the monster footage. On top of all of that, the film's limited budget and release schedule forced Tsuburaya to rethink his approach on stop motion. Instead, a man in a suit was the method to bring the beast to life. Tsuburaya felt reluctant to employ this technique, but the circumstances compelled him to go with it. However, it is worth mentioning that some stop motion photography was used in the final film. As stated in the previous episode, Akira Watanabe oversaw Gojira's design, coming up with a distinctive theropod appearance. Watanabe recruited sculptor Teizo Toshimitsu to create clay models of the prehistoric behemoth in order to give it a definitive appearance and to help gain a sense on how to construct a suit after it. Toshimitsu's first clay model for the suit featured a large head, little hands and feet, and scale-covered skin. While it matched Watanabe's design just fine, it was ultimately turned down, apparently for not being sufficiently dinosaur-like. So a second model was created, retaining most of the features from the previous model, only this time with the head size reduced and the body coated in smooth spherical bumps that helped give it an amphibious appearance. This one was also rejected. A third and final model was made, retaining the small head and stubby arms, and given a torso covered in rough-hewn pleats that resembled alligator skin. This design choice would also give the appearance of scarring from the H-bomb. This design was approved and was used as the model to create the suit. Now that he was done sculpting the prototypes, Toshimitsu had been assigned the task of constructing the suits. The Yagi brothers, along with model maker Eizo Kaimai, were ready to transform this luscious clay model into a 6.5 foot tall, intricate costume. The suit's inner frame was made of bamboo and chicken wire, covered in urethane foam padding, cushions, and fabric, and then covered in several layers of hot latex. Now, the final design was based on the clay prototype, however significant changes were made, like the head being shorter and having noticeable canine fangs, as well as the limbs being longer. But overall, it still matched the spirit of the prototype. The suit took about 2 months to make and was over 2 meters tall. And it was also really heavy, weighing about 220 pounds. Yeah, it was quite the beefy boy. Anyway, with the suit completed, it was now time to find the poor guy who would have to wear this thing. Director Honda recommended stuntman Haruo Nakajima, who had met with Tsuburaya to discuss the part, and Nakajima was hired on the spot. Katsumi Tezuka, the effects department section chief, approached Tsuburaya for the part and insisted on doing all of the suit work on his own, feeling Nakajima wasn't necessary. The problem was that Tsuburaya had already promised Nakajima the role, so as a way to keep both men happy, they were both given the role to play the monster. Both actors weren't too pleased about that outcome, with Nakajima stating that it was pretty difficult to work with Tezuka, who often gave him a rough time simply because Tezuka had seniority over him. When it came time to put on the suit, Nakajima was the first to try it on, and it was not a pleasant experience. He had said it was like being in a straitjacket. He was struggling just to move his fingers and could barely breathe. He only had a few inches of side-to-side head movement, and the dead weight of pulling the tail made it very difficult to walk. Almost immediately after entering the suit, Nakajima began to sweat profusely once inside. It was pure hell for the young actor. It was difficult just to stand in the thing, let alone start acting in it, but Nakajima showcased his endurance by persevering through the extreme weight of the costume and used all his physical strength just to move. And after a few steps, the actor fell over and couldn't get back up. The crew realized that the suit was simply too heavy for a regular person to move in, and when the Yagi brothers removed Nakajima from it, he was completely covered in his own sweat. Tezuka would then try on the costume, which produced the same result. He just walked a few steps before falling and being unable to get up, though he didn't go as far as Nakajima did, which resulted in Tsuburaya preferring Nakajima to work the majority of sequences, which Tezuka was not happy with. But the writing was on the wall. The suit was just unusable for filming due to its heavy weight and limited movement. It had to be rebuilt from the ground up. So a second suit was produced in 2 weeks, made with lighter latex, and was easier to maneuver in. But that didn't make it any easier to perform in. The movement inside the suit was still limited. Tiny holes were made in the neck to allow the performer to see where they were going, but their vision was still very limited. Not wanting to let the original suit go to waste, it was still utilized in the film, but it was sliced in half, with the upper body being used for scenes where Gojira pokes his head out of the water at Tokyo Bay, and the lower part modified with rope suspenders so that the actors could wear it like a set of overalls. This part of the suit was used for close-up shots as the monster roams around Tokyo. Believe it or not, this half suit is so iconic to the fandom that it actually has toys modeled after it. No joke. There have also been rumors of the actors being able to both open and close the mouth of the suit from within, and that is completely untrue, as it was impossible to control the mouth. This rumor could have stemmed from the little bar shown in Gojira's mouth in some publicity images. It was simply there just to keep the mouth open. It wasn't some sort of mechanism to open and close it. But with the creature having a radioactive breath ability, it has to open and close its mouth for the movie, and if the suit couldn't do it, a hand puppet surely could, and that's what was used. A hand-operated guignol of the monster's upper body was used to make facial movements and carry out actions that the suit was unable to perform, such as opening its mouth to release its atomic breath or biting a steel tower. Regarding the presentation of the atomic breath, this was accomplished in a number of methods. Close-ups of the puppet used to show the atomic breath had one that used a watery mist blasted through a small nozzle in the throat and triggered with air pressure, while another used a steamy mist. Finally, optical animation was used in a few shots that involved drawing dozens of cells one frame at a time. It was also at these moments that the monster's back fins would begin to glow, indicating that it was preparing to release its radioactive breath. This idea intended for light bulbs to be put inside the fins, but the result proved problematic, requiring additional animation for a convincing effect. Now the monster may have been completed, but now it needs a city to destroy. To find out what buildings Gojira would trample, Honda, Tsuburaya, Watanabe, and assistant director Koji Kajita traveled to Tokyo and climbed the rooftops of various buildings in order to study the monster's vantage points. Now, it was difficult for Watanabe to secure blueprints for the streets and structures seen in the film, largely because the proprietors of these establishments did not want their structures being destroyed in some movie for entertainment. So in response to this, Watanabe sent a team led by Yasuyuki Inoue to inspect the relevant areas, take photographs, and draw sketches to help translate all of this knowledge that the team collected into constructing designs for miniatures. Using all this as a guide, 40 carpenters worked under the direction of Yoshio Ide to create a miniature representation of the metropolis. The group had taken 30 days to build a 1/25th size model of the Ginza ward in Tokyo, with the crew frequently working through the night and even sleeping at the studio to finish the production. There have even been stories that Tsuburaya would destroy the miniature work and have it rebuilt if he didn't like how it looked. There was absolutely no compromise on the quality of the miniature work. Every effort was made to make these tiny buildings appear as authentic as possible to the real things. But as difficult as it was to produce them realistically, it was even more difficult to demolish them realistically, which frequently resulted in the staff members having to rebuild everything from the ground up if something did not fall apart properly. Speaking of which, Tsuburaya was unable to film the effect shots at standard rates because the monster's movements appeared unusual and too quick for something that was meant to be gigantic. In addition to looking fake, the buildings also collapsed way too fast. In fact, the very first day of special effects shooting itself was a fiasco. This first day was to have Gojira destroy the Dai building, and it was on this day that a string of unfortunate circumstances happened. Starting with a crew member getting into an accident by falling through the set, unintentionally ruining it, which led to hours of repair work. When it was time for Tezuka to get in the Gojira suit, he also fell through the set, lightly damaging it and injuring his jaw, causing both Tezuka to receive medical attention and the staff having to rebuild all the damage again. Nakajima would subsequently play Gojira in the scene and destroy the building without any problems, but Tsuburaya didn't find the scene all that convincing, rendering the footage as unusable. Over a full day of work and nothing was accomplished. There consistently seemed to be one issue after another. However, the team never gave up on making the film in spite of the obstacles. Each accident, oversight, or setback served as a learning experience. To help the buildings crumble, a team referred to as the Destroyers used tiny knives to create fractures in the plaster so that the buildings would collapse as intended. Tsuburaya invented a high frame rate shooting technique that recorded 120 to 240 frames per second. This was then lowered to 24 frames per second to help give the monster the appearance of having a lot of weight and having the buildings crumble realistically. However, this meant that the studio lights had to be twice as bright, and therefore twice as hot when using high-speed filming. Both Nakajima and Tezuka would frequently faint inside the suit due to the intense temperatures, which periodically reached 130 degrees. Now, in order to help them out, the performers were only allowed to wear the suit for about 3 minutes at a time. The suit would frequently sustain damage during production, requiring ongoing cleaning and repairs by the Yagi brothers. Overall, it took 71 days to complete the special effects sequences. Honda and his team had finished earlier with their own set of mishaps to work through, but I'll get into that another time. After all the shots were finished and edited together, Toho distributed the film in Japanese theaters on November 3rd, 1954. The film's budget was about 64 million yen, which was way more expensive than the typical Japanese picture at the time. Plus, prints and advertising boosted the budget to around 100 million yen. Toho really wanted all eyes on this movie, and went with a big advertising approach, and word of mouth quickly caught the public's attention. Did all the staff's hard work make this unique movie pay off? Short answer is yes. The film broke a new opening day record for the Japanese theater chain, selling 33,000 tickets at Toho's theater in Tokyo alone, with the film grossing 183 million yen in distributor rentals, making it the 8th highest grossing Japanese film in 1954, and was Toho's 3rd highest grossing film of the year. As you can tell, the film performed great for its time. But how well does it hold up today? We'll find out next time when I review the original Japanese classic, Gojira.